The Road to a New Beginning. Chapter 1. A Chance to Change. The alarm clock buzzed loudly at 6 a.m., breaking the silence of the small apartment. Daniel groaned and reached out to turn it off. His eyes felt heavy, and his body refused to move. It was another Monday. Another long day at a job he hated. He had been working as a cashier at a grocery store for the past 3 years, and every day felt exactly the same. Daniel got up slowly and walked to the small bathroom. He splashed cold water on his face and looked at himself in the mirror. Is this really my life? He thought. He was 27 years old, living in a tiny apartment, and had no clear direction. His childhood dreams of becoming a writer had faded away, replaced by the routine of earning just enough to pay the bills. After a quick breakfast of toast and coffee, Daniel grabbed his uniform and left for work. The streets of New York City were already busy, filled with people rushing to their jobs. As he walked to the subway station, he saw a street musician playing the violin. The music was beautiful and filled the air with emotion. For a moment, Daniel stopped and listened. The musician's eyes were closed, lost in the melody, as if nothing else in the world mattered. Daniel wished he could feel that way about something in his life. At the grocery store, the hours passed slowly. Customer after customer came and went, each with their own problems and worries. Some were in a hurry, others were rude, and a few were kind. But to Daniel, they were all just part of the never-ending cycle. He rang up groceries, gave change, and repeated the same phrases over and over again. Then something unexpected happened. A middle-aged man in a suit approached Daniel's register. He had kind eyes and a warm smile. "Rough day?" the man asked as Daniel scanned his items. Daniel forced a small smile. "Just the usual." The man nodded. "I used to work a job like this when I was younger. It was tough, but it taught me a lot. What do you really want to do?" Daniel hesitated. He hadn't talked about his dreams in years. "I wanted to be a writer," he admitted, almost embarrassed. The man's face lit up. "A writer? That's wonderful. Do you still write?" Daniel shook his head. "Not really. I don't have time. And even if I did, I don't think I'm good enough." The man took out a business card and handed it to Daniel. "Listen, I work in publishing. If you ever decide to write something, send it to me. You never know what could happen." Daniel stared at the card in surprise. The name on it read, Michael Lawson, Senior Editor, New York Publishing House. He looked up, but the man had already walked away, blending into the crowd of customers. That night, Daniel sat at his small desk, the business card in his hand. Could he really give writing another chance? He opened his laptop, hesitated for a moment, then began to type. The words didn't come easily at first, but as he continued, a spark inside him reignited. For the first time in years, he felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Chapter 2. Taking the First Step. The next morning, Daniel woke up with a strange feeling. Excitement. It had been so long since he had felt motivated about anything. He glanced at his laptop, still open from the night before. The document contained only a few paragraphs, but they represented something important. A new beginning. As he sipped his coffee, he reread what he had written. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. The important thing was that he had started. He had taken the first step toward his dream. At work, Daniel found it hard to concentrate. His mind kept drifting back to his story. Ideas for characters, plot twists, and settings swirled in his head. For the first time, he saw the world differently. Not just as a routine to endure, but as a source of inspiration. During his lunch break, he pulled out Michael Lawson's business card and stared at it. Should he really send something? Was he ready for this? Doubt crept in, but he pushed it aside. I have nothing to lose, he told himself. That evening, Daniel sat down at his desk again. He wrote for hours, losing himself in the story. Words flowed more easily now, as if they had been waiting for this moment. By midnight, he had written 5 pages, more than he had in years. The next day, with his heart pounding, he composed an email to Michael Lawson. He attached the first chapter of his story and took a deep breath before hitting send. Days passed, and Daniel checked his email constantly. Doubts returned. Maybe he won't even read it, he thought. Maybe it's not good enough. Then a reply came. Daniel hesitated before opening it. His hands trembled as he read the words. Daniel, thank you for sending me your work. I just finished reading it, and I must say you have potential. I'd love to discuss this further. Are you available for a meeting next week? Let me know. Best, Michael Lawson. Daniel could hardly believe his eyes. Someone in the publishing world thought he had potential. His heart raced with excitement and fear. This was really happening. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt something he had forgotten. Hope and the thrill of possibility. Chapter 3. A meeting that could change everything. The day of the meeting arrived, and Daniel felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had never been inside a publishing house before, let alone had a meeting with a senior editor. As he stood outside the towering glass building, he took a deep breath and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted him warmly. Mr. Lawson is expecting you. Please take a seat, and he'll be with you shortly. Daniel sat in the waiting area, his mind racing. What if Michael didn't like his story after all? What if this was all just a polite rejection in person? Before he could overthink any further, the receptionist called his name. Mr. Lawson, we'll see you now. Daniel walked into a spacious office filled with bookshelves and framed literary awards. Michael stood up and extended his hand. Daniel, it's great to meet you in person. Please have a seat. They talked about Daniel's story, his writing style, and his inspirations. Michael had constructive feedback but also genuine enthusiasm for Daniel's potential. Your writing has something special, Daniel. It's raw and real. I see promise in it. Daniel could hardly believe what he was hearing. Do you really think I have a chance? Michael smiled. More than just a chance. I want you to refine this manuscript and send me more chapters. If things go well, we might consider publishing it. Daniel felt like he was dreaming. Thank you, he said, his voice filled with emotion. As he left the building, a new feeling washed over him. Determination. This was his moment. He was no longer just a cashier with a dream. He was a writer, and for the first time in his life, he truly believed it. Chapter 4. The hard work begins. Daniel quickly realized that writing wasn't just about inspiration, it was about discipline. His excitement from the meeting with Michael Lawson had fueled him for days. But now, as he sat at his small desk staring at the blinking cursor on his laptop screen, doubt crept in again. Could he really finish this book? He set a goal. Write every single day. No excuses. Some nights, words flowed effortlessly, and his fingers danced across the keyboard. Other nights, he stared at the screen for hours, struggling to put together a single coherent sentence. The process was frustrating, but he refused to give up. During the day, he continued his shifts at the grocery store. His coworkers noticed a change in him. He seemed more focused, more driven. His manager, Mr. Thompson, who had known him for years, pulled him aside one evening. "You've been different lately, Daniel," he said, adjusting his glasses. "You're here, but it's like your mind is somewhere else." Daniel hesitated, then smiled. "I've been working on something outside of work. A book, actually." Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "A book? Well, that's something. I always thought you had more in you than just standing behind that register. Keep at it." Those words stayed with Daniel. They weren't profound, but they meant something. Maybe for the first time, people saw him as more than just a cashier. As the weeks passed, Daniel realized that writing a novel was nothing like writing a short story or a journal entry. It required structure, consistency, and above all, patience. He followed a strict routine. Wake up at 5 a.m. and write for 2 hours before work. Spend lunch breaks reading books on storytelling and character development. Write again after work, no matter how exhausted he felt. His apartment became a creative battlefield. Sticky notes filled with plot ideas covered his walls, books were scattered across his desk, and a permanent cup of cold coffee sat beside his laptop. But not every day was productive. Some days, Daniel questioned everything. Were his characters interesting enough? Was his plot compelling? Would anyone even care to read his book? One particularly difficult night, he sat at his desk, frustrated. He had spent 2 hours rewriting a single paragraph. His head ached, his fingers were stiff, and his motivation was draining. He slammed his laptop shut and sighed. "This is impossible," he muttered. Just as he was about to give up for the night, his phone buzzed. It was an email from Michael Lawson. "Hey Daniel, how's the manuscript coming along? Don't overthink it, just keep going. Even the best writers doubt themselves. Looking forward to seeing your progress." Daniel exhaled. It was as if Michael knew exactly what he needed to hear. He reopened his laptop, took a deep breath, and continued writing. Personal sacrifices. The deeper he got into his novel, the more sacrifices he had to make. His social life became non-existent. His friends invited him out on weekends, but he always declined. "Come on, Daniel. Just one night out, you need a break," his friend Ryan pleaded. "I can't, man. I'm on a deadline," Daniel replied. Ryan shook his head. "You used to be fun. Now all you do is work and write." Daniel knew his friend meant well, but this was his dream. He wasn't going to let distractions stop him now. Even his family started noticing his absence. His mother called one Sunday afternoon. "Daniel, you haven't visited in weeks. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with something important." She paused. "More important than your family?" Daniel felt a pang of guilt. "It's not like that. I promise I'll visit soon." But he didn't. Not yet. After months of writing, deleting, and rewriting, Daniel hit a turning point. One evening, while revising an important chapter, something clicked. His protagonist, who once felt one-dimensional, now had depth. The story, which had felt disjointed, now had rhythm. For the first time, Daniel felt like a real writer. Excited, he sent the updated chapters to Michael. The waiting period felt unbearable. Days passed, then a week. He checked his email obsessively. What if Michael hated it? Then an email arrived. Daniel, I just finished reading the new chapters. This is excellent work. The improvements are noticeable. Let's schedule another meeting. I think we have something here. Daniel's heart pounded. He had done it. He had taken an idea, shaped it into a real story, and impressed a professional editor. With the manuscript nearing completion, Daniel faced a new fear. What came next? Could he handle the pressure of publishing? What if readers didn't like his book? One evening, as he sat in his dimly lit apartment, he realized something. Fear had controlled his life for too long. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of never being good enough. But now, he had proof that he was capable. He had pushed through doubts, made sacrifices, and stayed committed. He was no longer just dreaming. He was doing. And soon, the world would see it too. As he typed the final sentence of his manuscript, he smiled. The hard work had only just begun, but for the first time, he was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 5. A Dream Realized. Daniel sat at his desk, staring at the email on his screen. His manuscript was finished, sent, and now all he could do was wait. The past few months had been the most challenging yet rewarding of his life. He had poured his heart into his writing, sacrificing sleep, social time, and even moments of self-doubt to complete his novel. Then, one evening, just as he was closing up at the grocery store, his phone buzzed. Michael Lawson, your manuscript. His hands trembled as he opened the email. Daniel, we love your story. We want to publish it. His breath caught in his throat. Was this real? He read the words again, making sure he wasn't imagining them. A wave of emotions crashed over him. Shock, joy, disbelief. Lisa, his coworker, noticed his pale face. Daniel, you okay? He looked up, barely able to contain his excitement. I think I just got my book published. Lisa's eyes widened. No way! Are you serious? A grin broke across his face. Yeah, I think I am. The store erupted in small cheers. Even Mr. Thompson, the usually grumpy manager, gave him a nod of approval. Knew you had something special, kid. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something unfamiliar. Pride. A few months later, Daniel stood outside a bustling bookstore in downtown New York, staring at a large poster in the window. It had his name on it. His book's title gleamed in bold letters with the words, Book Signing Today, underneath. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. A line of people, real readers, stood waiting for him, each holding a copy of his book. It felt surreal. Just a year ago, he had been stuck in an endless cycle, ringing up groceries and feeling lost. And now people wanted to meet him, to hear his story, to read his words. Excuse me, a young woman said as she reached the front of the line. I just wanted to say your book really inspired me. I'm an aspiring writer too, and reading your journey gave me the courage to start. Daniel smiled, feeling a familiar warmth in his chest. That means more to me than you know. Keep writing, no matter what. As she left, Daniel took a moment to look around. This was it. Not the end, but the beginning of everything he had dreamed of.